KHUSHʿÂL Khan KHATTAK, the renowned chieftain of the powerful Afghan tribe of KHATTAK, alike a warrior and a poet, was born in the year 1022 of the Hijra, or 1613 of the Bulgar era. Shahbaz Khan, his father, having received a wound in a battle with the Yusufzis, one of the most numerous and powerful of all the Afghan tribes, from the effects of which he shortly after died. KHUSHʿÂL, who had also been severely wounded in the head and knee in the same battle in the year 1050, or 1640 for the Bulgar era, with the unanimous consent and approbation of his relations and friends, became chief of this tribe. His father's fief was confirmed to him by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, together with the charge of protecting the royal road from KHATTAK on the Indus to Peshawar, and other duties were entrusted to him by that sovereign, in whose estimation KHUSHʿÄL stood high. He accompanied Sultan Murad Bakhsh, the son of that monarch, on his expedition to Badakhshan in 1645, the Common Era, and was also engaged in other wars of that period. On the death of Shah Jahan, KHUSHʿÄL continued to serve his son and successor, Aurangzeb, in the same capacity as formerly, but after some time, through the machinations of his enemies, among whom was Amir Khan, Subbahdar, or governor of the province of Kabul, he fell under the displeasure, or rather suspicion, of the monarch, and was sent prisoner to the strong hill fortress of Gwalior in Upper India, where he remained in captivity about 7 years. And there it was that many of the following poems were written, at length, at the recommendation of Muhammad Khan, the second of that name, Aurangzeb, released KHUSHʿÄL, and sent him along with the noble just referred to, who had been lately appointed Subbahdar of Kabul, for the purpose of settling the affairs of the Peshawar district, which had fallen into a very distracted state. But the iron had entered the soul of KHUSHʿÄL. On reaching his native country, he kept as retired as possible, ceased to hold any intercourse, communication, with the governor of the province and other subordinate officers, and declined rendering any assistance to the troops of the emperor. KHUSHʿÄL's tribe had been long at feud with many of the other Afghans around Peshawar, amongst whom were the Yusufzis, fighting against whom, as before mentioned, his father lost his life, and was generally engaged in hostilities with one or another of them. But with the Afridis, who were also powerful, the KHATTAKs maintained a close alliance. Matters at length went so far between the KHATTAK chieftain and the Mughal authorities as to produce an open rupture. KHUSHʿÄL now girded his loins with the sword of courage, and in concert with Amal Khan and Darya Khan, chiefs of the Afridis, carried on for 7 or 8 years a determined and destructive war of the Mughals, in which latter were generally defeated. The whole of the Afghan tribes from Banu to Jalalabad, seeing the success of their countrymen over the hated Mughals, had been drawn by degrees into the confederacy, which now aimed at no less than total expulsion of the Mughals from Afghanistan. But the Yusufzis, who could have aided so effectually, held aloof, would render no assistance to the countrymen. Through enmity to the KHATTAKs, notwithstanding that KHUSHʿÄL went in person, even as far as the Zuat Valley, Suwat Valley to endeavor to instill into them some of his own confederates' patriotic spirit, but without effect, they were deaf to the voice of the charmer. These effects he refers to in the first of the following poems written on that occasion. Affairs at Peshawar had assumed such a serious aspect that Aurangzeb considered it necessary to appear in person on the scene, and for about 2 years he remained encamped at KHATTAK, superintending the prosecution of the war, and that wily monarch, finding force unavailable in such a difficult country, began to try the effect of gold. In this he met with the success he desired, and some of the petty clans of the Confederacy became fascinated with the gold of the Mughals and submitted to the government, whilst others of the KHUSHʿÂL's friends began either to desert him or to give him cause to doubt their sincerity. And Amal Khan and Darya Khan, his most powerful and most trusty supporters, having previously been removed by death from the scene, such an effect was produced upon the fine spirit of KHUSHʿÄL, as the following pages testify, that he became disgusted and sought to find peace and retirement. At length, he resigned the chieftainship of the KHATTAK tribe in favor of his eldest son, Ashraf, and devoted himself to books and literature. On Ashraf's becoming chief of the clan, Bahram, another son, who appears to have always regarded with aversion by his father for his degenerate acts, succeeded in gaining over a considerable party to his side and appeared bent upon bringing misfortune upon his brother. They met in battle several times, and on one occasion Bahram was taken prisoner, but succeeded by his artfulness and duplicity in exciting the pity of his injured brother, who set him at liberty. KHUSHʿÄL, well aware of disposition of Bahram, was highly incensed with Ashraf for allowing him to escape so easily, as it turned out, not without reason, for no sooner was Bahram free than he again commenced his intrigues against Ashraf, and at length, in the year 1093, or 1681 of the Vulgar era, he succeeded in betraying him into the hands of the Mughals. Aurangzeb sent him prisoner to the strong fortress of Bijapur in southern India, where after lingering in captivity for about 10 years, he died. A further account of this unfortunate chieftain will be found prefixed to his poems. Like other sons of KHUSHʿÄL, as well as numbers of his descendants, he was a poet, as well as his father. Afghans Khan, the youngest son of Ashraf, now took up arms in his father's cause. And was instilled in the chieftainship by his grandfather, who was still regarded as their natural and rightful chief by the majority of the tribe. But the youth and inexperience of Afghans, for he was only 17 years of age, could not yet cope with the wily Bahram, who was also aided and upheld by the Mughals. KHUSHʿÄL, therefore, taking Afzal's youth into consideration, and in order to prevent his clansmen from shedding the blood of each other, interfered between the contending parties, fearing that the tribe might hesitate to obey one of such inexperience, and allowed Bahram to enjoy the chieftainship, advising Afzal to bide his time and not lengthen his father's captivity by opposition for the present. Afzal, therefore, retired with his family into the friendly country of the Afridis. Not content with this success in all his schemes, Bahram would not allow his aged father to end his days in peace. Several times he made attempts upon his life. He once dispatched his son, Mukarram Khan, with a body of troops to endeavor to secure the old man's person. Mukarram went, as directed, against his grandfather, but the brave old chieftain, who had attained his 77th year, having discovered the party from the place of his retreat, advanced to meet them, with his drawn sword in his hand. At the same time, to quote the words of Afzal Khan, his grandson, already alluded to, who subsequently wrote a history of these events, exclaiming, "Whoever are men amongst you, come to the sword if you dare." But veneration for the aged chieftain was so predominant in everyone's breast that no one would make any attempt to lay hands on him. And Mukarram, ashamed, returned as he went. Bahram, his father, enraged at his son's failure, ordered him to return with directions to kill KHUSHʿÄL with his own hand if he should refuse to deliver himself up. On Mukarram's return to carry out this inhumane order of a degenerate son, the old chief again advanced from his place of shelter, and taking his stand upon the crest of the hill, with his good sword in his hand, again dared them to approach, and in this manner is said to have remained on the watch for several days. But no one amongst the party had either the inclination or the courage to face him, whom they still regarded as their natural chief. Bahram, however, thinking the prey in his toils, had dispatched a message to the Mughal governor at Peshawar with the effect that the old lion was at length at bay, and request him to send a sufficient escort to take charge of him and conduct him to Peshawar. KHUSHʿÄL, however, having been warned, as soon as night set in, made his escape. After two of Bahram's party had lost their lives, and by the next morning succeeded in reaching the boundary of the Afridi tribe, who had always been his friends, at a distance of 90 miles from Akora, the scene of the occurrences just related. KHUSHʿÄL took up his residence in the Afridi country and returned no more to the home of his fathers, which he loved so well. He died as he had lived, free among the mountains of his native land in the 78th year of his age, for taking his departure from a world in which he had drunk so deeply of the bitter cup of treachery and unfaithfulness. He particularly charged those few of his children and friends who had remained faithful to him throughout all his trials and misfortunes, that they should bury him where, to use his own words, the dust of the hooves of the Mughal cavalry might not light upon his grave, that they should carefully conceal his last resting place, lest the Mughals might seek it out and insult the ashes of him whose name, whilst in life, they quailed, by whose sword and that of his clansmen, their best troops have been scattered like chaff before the gale. And remember, of course, that in Islam there is, we have environmentally friendly burials, so there's no cremation. We don't, we don't bury with a lot. We just, wrap the body in a cheap sheet and put it in the ground, rich or poor. And we don't, deface the graves of other people. It's just, no. A third request was that in case any of his faithful children should succeed at any time in laying hands upon Bahram the malignant, they should divide his body into two parts and should burn one half at the head of his grave and the other at the foot. He was buried accordingly at a place named Srai, a small hamlet in the KHATTAK mountains, where his tomb may still be seen, and according to his dying request, his last resting place was kept concealed till all danger of insult from the Mughals had passed away. KHUSHʿÄL Khan was the father of 57 sons besides several daughters, but with the exception of 4 or 5 of the former, they do not appear to have been particularly worthy of their parents' affection. Now, regardless of what people believe and do, there's certain good that should be done to them. KHUSHʿÄL, from all accounts, was a voluminous author and is said to have composed about 350 different works. This, however, must be greatly exaggerated. Nevertheless, he is the author of numerous works. Well, what if they were like short things, like a page or something? I've certainly surpassed that. I'm not just talking scholastic presentations. I'm talking, which I have myself seen both in Persian and in the Pushto or Afghan, consisting of poetry. See, that's how, a person can have that many, write a poem a day and surpass that within a year, right? Medicine, ethics, religion, jurisprudence, philosophy, falconry, etc. Together with an account of the events of his own checkered life. It is greatly to be regretted, however, that his descendants after his death had not the opportunity to collect all his writings together, and the upshot is that many are known only by name. Amongst those which have been lost or dispersed is, I fear, the autobiography I've referred to, some of KHUSHʿÄL's poetical effusions written during his exile in India, and while struggling against the power of Aurangzeb, will, I think, be considered highly of, even in the form of a literal translation and in an English dress, as coming from the pen of an Afghan chief, contemporary with the times of our Charles I, evincing as they do a spirit of patriotism and love of home and country, not usual in the Orient heart, but such as we might look for in the Scottish Highlander, or Swedish mountaineer of bygone days, whom the hardy Afghans strongly resemble. Now, it's not that you don't protect your homeland or your family or anything like that. It's patriotism has sort of a tinge to it that my nationality, my group, and then people break into ethnic and other parties and fight over that. So the Oriental heart is more principle than grouping, you could say. A more extended account of KHUSHʿÄL's writings and those of his descendants we found in the introductory chapter to my Afghan grammar, published last year, together with an account of the Afghans and their literature. Up to the time of KHUSHʿÄL's chieftainship, the bounds of the KHATTAK country were not well defined. That is to say, each family of the tribe had no fixed lands allotted to them. KHUSHʿÄL caused a survey to be made of all available land, fixed the boundaries, and entered them in a register, and according to the number of each man's family, assigned a corresponding quantity of land for cultivation. This arrangement is still in force, and hitherto has not, that I am aware of, been deviated from, and many small towers of stone erected to mark the different boundaries still remain. Marking boundaries, Islamically, you can say that's acceptable, but you don't fight to extend boundaries. You don't fight to get slaves. You don't fight to get treasure. So